I was holding my champagne glass when my only son David walked over to my table. His new bride Sarah stood a few feet away, watching us with a tight, expectant smile. The ballroom was loud, filled with the sounds of clinking silverware and laughter, but when David leaned in, his voice cut through the noise with chilling clarity. At the reception, my son looked at me and said, "The best wedding gift would be you leaving this family for good." Several guests nearby gasped, turning their heads in shock. My sister sitting to my left froze with her fork halfway to her mouth. I did not cry. I did not ask him why he would say such a thing, nor did I demand an apology. I simply looked into his eyes, searching for the little boy I had raised by myself after his father passed away. I didn't find him. Instead, I saw a grown man who had allowed his ambitious, controlling wife to script his thoughts and dictate his actions. I set down my champagne glass on the white linen tablecloth. Without a single word, I picked up my clutch, turned my back on my son, and walked out the heavy oak doors of the ballroom. Stepping into the cool evening air, I pulled out my phone. I didn't call a lawyer, and I certainly didn't call the police. I made one simple phone call to the financial institution that managed my credit cards. "Yes, this is Irene Vance," I told the representative. "I need to immediately freeze the primary card ending in 4102 and cancel all authorized user privileges. Right now. Thank you." I slipped the phone back into my purse, walked to the valet stand, and handed the young man my ticket. I was going home. 15 minutes later, everything inside that reception hall was about to change. I was already merging onto the highway when David's phone screen likely lit up with reality. Back at the reception, the venue's catering manager, a pragmatic woman named Helen, walked briskly up to the sweetheart table. I had worked closely with Helen for months planning the lavish evening Sarah had demanded. Helen did not care about family drama. She cared about the balance sheet. She leaned down and informed David that the credit card on file for the remaining $15,000 balance covering the open premium bar, the late-night catering spread, and the luxury honeymoon suite upstairs had just been declined. My phone vibrated in my cup holder. It was David. I let it ring. He called again. I ignored it. I could perfectly picture the scene unfolding. Sarah's carefully constructed smile dropping as David patted his tuxedo pockets. David trying to explain that there must be a mistake, asking Helen to just run the card again. The realization setting in that the open bar was being immediately shut down, the bartenders quietly packing away the top-shelf liquor. For 2 years, I had funded their lifestyle. I had paid for Sarah's designer wedding dress because she claimed her parents couldn't afford it. I had covered the deposit for this very venue. I had done it out of love, believing that if I eased their financial burdens, they could start their marriage on solid footing. Instead, my generosity had been viewed as weakness. They assumed my money was an endless well and my presence was an irritating tax they had to pay to access it. My phone buzzed a third time. A text message from David Mom. "Where are you?" "The venue says the card is frozen. I need you to fix this." I didn't reply. I kept my eyes on the road, feeling an unexpected sense of calm washing over me. The heavy weight of constant accommodation was finally lifting off my shoulders. I wasn't just fixing the venue bill. I was fixing my entire life. I pulled into the driveway of my 4-bedroom house on Maple Street. It was the house my late husband and I had bought 30 years ago, the house where David took his first steps. A year ago, David and Sarah had convinced me to let them move in to save money for their future. Slowly, they had taken over. Sarah claimed the master bedroom because she needed the natural light for her home office. I had quietly moved my things into the small finished basement, telling myself it was fine that I was downsizing anyway. Walking through the front door, the silence of the empty house greeted me. I walked straight upstairs to the master bedroom. Clothes were thrown over the armchair, and Sarah's expensive cosmetics covered my antique vanity. But what caught my eye was a glossy folder sitting on the bedside table. I flipped it open. It was a proposal from a local contractor. The title read, Basement Renovation, Home Gym and Sauna. I stared at the blueprints. They had mapped out exactly how they were going to tear down the walls of my basement bedroom. They had never planned for me to stay. David's cruel words at the wedding weren't a sudden outburst. They were the culmination of a plan. They wanted the house, the money, and the lifestyle, all without the inconvenience of my existence. I didn't break down. I didn't scream at the walls. Decades of running my own household had taught me that emotions do not solve practical problems. Only action does. I walked into the kitchen, opened the junk drawer, and pulled out a roll of heavy-duty black trash bags. Then I went to my laptop and searched for two things: a local storage facility with 24-hour access and a highly rated emergency locksmith. It was time to clean house. By 8:00 a.m. the next morning, a professional moving crew I had hired at double the Sunday rate arrived at my front door. My neighbor Nancy walked over holding 2 cups of coffee. She took one look at the moving truck and raised an eyebrow. "Spring cleaning, Irene?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied, taking a sip of the coffee. "David and Sarah are moving out." I led the crew upstairs and instructed them to pack everything in the master bedroom and the guest room that belonged to the newlyweds. Clothes, shoes, electronics, Sarah's vanity collection, David's golf clubs. All of it went into sturdy cardboard boxes. Since they had never signed a lease, never paid a dime in rent, and never contributed to the property taxes, there was no need for a lengthy legal eviction process. They were guests in my home, and their invitation had officially expired. I drove to the storage facility a few miles down the road. I rented a large, climate-controlled unit in David's name, paid for exactly 1 month in advance in cash, and supervised the movers as they stacked the boxes neatly inside. By noon, the house was empty of their presence. The heavy scent of Sarah's expensive perfume was already fading from the upstairs hallway. At 1:00 p.m., the locksmith arrived. I had him replace the front door deadbolt, the back patio lock, and the side garage door. I stood on my front porch holding the shiny new silver keys in my hand. For the first time in a year, the house felt like it belonged to me again. I walked downstairs to the basement, grabbed my favorite reading chair, and carried it back up to the master bedroom where it belonged. Monday morning at 6:30 a.m., my phone rang. The caller ID flashed David's name. I poured myself a fresh cup of tea, sat at the kitchen island, and answered. "Mom, finally." David's voice was frantic, echoing slightly against what sounded like a large terminal. "We're at the airport. The ticket agent is telling us our flights to Bora Bora are canceled. They said the purchaser requested a full refund yesterday. Call the airline right now and fix our flight boards in an hour." In the background, I could hear Sarah's shrill voice demanding to speak to a manager. I took a sip of my tea. "I can't fix it, David. I canceled the tickets." The line went completely silent for a few seconds. "What are you talking about? Why would you do that?" "You told me your best wedding gift would be me leaving the family." I stated simply, my voice completely level. "I am respecting your wishes. Family members pay for luxury honeymoons. People who are no longer in your family do not. I withdrew my financial support." "Mom, you're overreacting." David raised his voice. "It was just a stressful day." Sarah was overwhelmed. "You can't just strand us at the airport." "I am not stranding you," I replied. "You are a married adult. You have your own bank accounts. You can purchase new tickets if you wish to go to Bora Bora. We can't afford last-minute, first-class tickets," he yelled. "Then I suggest you look into a more affordable destination," I said. "We are coming back to the house to sort this out right now." David threatened, his tone shifting from panic to anger. "Have a safe drive," I said, and calmly ended the call. An hour later, an Uber pulled up to the curb. David and Sarah marched up the driveway, dragging their expensive matching luggage behind them. Sarah looked furious, her face flushed red while David marched slightly ahead of her with a look of pure entitlement. I watched through the front window as David jammed his key into the deadbolt. He twisted it. Nothing happened. He pulled it out, checked the key, and tried again, rattling the brass handle aggressively. I unlocked the heavy wooden door and opened it, leaving the locked steel security screen firmly between us. "Open the door, Irene," Sarah snapped, completely dropping her usual sweet facade. "This isn't funny." I didn't look at her. I looked directly at my son. I slid a plain white envelope through the mail slot on the security door. It fluttered down and landed on the welcome mat. "What is this?" David asked, bending down to pick it up. "That is the key to Unit 42 at the Oak Street storage facility, along with a receipt," I explained. "All of your belongings are safely packed inside. I paid for the first 30 days. After that, the monthly fee is your responsibility." David stared at the storage key in his hand, his mouth opening and closing in disbelief. "You packed our stuff. You're throwing us out on the street." "You aren't on the street, David. You have jobs. You have the ability to rent an apartment," I said. "This is my house. You made it incredibly clear that my presence was a burden to you. So I am removing the burden. I am removing myself from your lives, your housing, and your finances." Sarah shoved past David and grabbed the screen door handle, yanking it hard. "You can't do this. Half of this house is David's inheritance." "I'm not dead yet, Sarah," I replied softly. "And right now, my name is the only one on the deed." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she realized the housing situation was not a bluff. She crossed her arms, her breathing heavy. "Fine. If you want to play games, fine. We'll go to a hotel." David transferred money from the house fund. The house fund was a joint savings account I had set up with David a year prior. The intention was to build a down payment for their future home. I had deposited $45,000 into it. David had contributed exactly $2,000. Sarah had contributed nothing. "Actually, before you check into a hotel, you should check your banking app," I suggested smoothly. David hastily pulled his phone from his pocket, his thumb swiping frantically across the screen. I watched the blood drain entirely from his face as the account balance loaded. "Where is it?" David whispered. "Mom, where is the 45,000? "I went to the bank yesterday," I explained. "As a primary account holder, I am fully within my rights to withdraw my own funds at any time without asking permission. I removed my $45,000. Your $2,000 is still sitting there. It should cover a few nights at a modest hotel." No lawyers were needed, no complicated legal battles. It was basic, everyday banking. I had simply stopped being the bank. Sarah grabbed David's arm, looking at his phone screen. "She stole our money." "It was never your money, Sarah," I corrected her, keeping my voice perfectly calm. "It was a gift, intended for a son who respected his mother. Since you both made it clear I am no longer part of this family, the gift has been revoked." "You promised us that money," Sarah yelled, her voice echoing down the quiet suburban street. Nancy next door stepped out onto her porch with her watering can, watching the scene unfold. "Things change," I said. "Goodbye, David." I closed the heavy wooden door, turned the deadbolt, and stood in the entryway. I could hear everything perfectly through the open living room window. Without my money cushioning their lives, the foundation of their relationship immediately cracked. "Do something!" Sarah screamed at David. "Tell her to open the door. We don't have anywhere to go." "What do you want me to do, Sarah?" David shouted back, sounding panicked and entirely out of his depth. "She changed the locks. She took the money. You told me she was a pushover. Sarah shrieked, entirely abandoning any pretense of affection. You said she would just hand over the house and go live in an apartment. You said all we had to do was push her a little bit, and she would fold. I stood in my foyer, shaking my head. The truth was ugly, but it was necessary to hear. I only said that because you kept threatening to call off the wedding if we didn't get the master bedroom. David fired back. Well, look where we are now, David. We have $2,000, no house, and no honeymoon. I am not sleeping in a cheap motel. I watched through the curtains as Sarah turned on her heel, pulling her suitcase violently down the driveway. She marched down the sidewalk without looking back, leaving David standing completely alone in the driveway with his luggage. He stood there for a long time. He looked at the closed front door. He looked at Nancy, who was silently watering the same fern she had been watering for 10 minutes. Finally, he pulled out his phone, ordered another car, and sat on his suitcase on the curb until it arrived. I walked into my kitchen, put the kettle on the stove, and enjoyed the complete, uninterrupted silence of my home. 3 weeks passed. I didn't reach out, and I blocked Sarah's number entirely. I spent my days repainting the master bedroom and having coffee with friends I had neglected during the 2 years I spent catering to my son's relationship. On a Tuesday afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was David. He looked exhausted. His suit was wrinkled and he had lost weight. I opened the door, but I didn't unlatch the screen. "Mom," he said softly, staring at his shoes. "Can we talk?" I unlocked the screen and let him into the kitchen. I poured him a cup of coffee. He sat at the island, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. "Sarah left me," he admitted, his voice hollow. "She moved in with a friend. She said she didn't sign up for a marriage where she had to struggle financially." I sat across from him. I didn't offer a comforting hug. I didn't tell him everything would be okay. I simply nodded. "I'm sorry you are going through this, David. It is a painful lesson." "I was so stupid," he said, finally looking up at me. "I let her convince me that you were trying to control us. I wanted to make her happy, so I just went along with it. I'm sorry for what I said at the wedding. I didn't mean it." "You said it, David. Words have consequences," I replied calmly. He swallowed hard. "I can't afford the apartment I'm looking at. I need to move back into my old room, just for a few months to get on my feet." I looked at my son, loving him, but knowing exactly what I had to do. "No, David. You cannot move back in." His eyes widened in shock. "But I'm your son." "You are my son, and I love you," I said firmly. "But you are 28 years old. I am selling this house next month. You need to figure out your own life without my wallet as your safety net." 6 months later, the house on Maple Street was sold to a lovely young couple with a golden retriever. I didn't need 4 bedrooms and a large yard. I took the equity and bought a bright, modern 2-bedroom condo closer to downtown. It had a balcony overlooking a small park, and I didn't have to share the space with anyone. I joined a local book club, started taking pottery classes, and finally booked the trip to Italy I had been putting off for a decade. My finances were entirely my own, and my time belonged only to me. David and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship, but with entirely new rules. We meet for lunch on the first Sunday of every month. I pay for my meal, and he pays for his. He is currently renting a small studio apartment across town and working overtime at his firm. He looks tired, but for the first time in his adult life, he looks proud of himself. He is learning the value of $1, and more importantly, the value of respect. Sarah filed for divorce shortly after the house incident, realizing there was no hidden trust fund to extract. I often think back to that evening at the wedding reception, standing with the champagne glass in my hand. Sarah and David had truly believed that the greatest gift I could give them was disappearing, leaving my assets behind for them to consume. They were wrong. The greatest gift I gave my son was not money, a house, or a luxury vacation. The best gift I gave him was cutting him off, forcing him to stand on his own 2 feet. And the best gift I gave myself was realizing that my role as a mother did not require me to be a martyr in my own life. If there is one thing this entire experience taught me, it is that unconditional love does not mean unconditional financial support. For so long, I believed that being a good mother meant making my son's life as easy as possible. But by constantly cushioning his falls, I wasn't raising an independent adult. I was simply funding his entitlement. Setting firm boundaries isn't cruel, and prioritizing your own peace of mind does not make you selfish. Sometimes the most profound act of love is simply stepping out of the way and letting people face the reality of their own choices. You do not have to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. Your life, your home, and your respect are worth protecting. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with a family member or step back from being someone's safety net? I would love to hear how you navigated that. Share your stories in the comments below. If you connected with this story and want to hear more real-life experiences about setting boundaries, navigating family dynamics, and taking back your power, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next video.